Just picture this for a second. It's February 1942. You're on a captured airfield in Java. The air is just thick, with that heat and humidity. And right there, sitting on the runway, is this American giant, a B-17 flying fortress. To the Japanese forces who found it, this machine was way more than just a trophy. It was a puzzle.
So how can your enemy's best weapon end up being your greatest teacher? Because this bomber, it held a secret. And that secret wasn't hidden in its machine guns or its fancy bomb sight. Nope. The secret was literally built into the metal of the plane, and every single rivet, every wire. And it was a lesson so powerful, it wouldn't just show Japan why they were losing the war, it would give them the exact blueprint for how to rise from the ashes and become an industrial giant. This is the story of how that happened.
Finding that B-17, along with a few others that were banged up, was like hitting the jackpot for military intelligence. Word was sent back to Tokyo immediately, and they sent in the A-Team, the engineers from the Giken, the Air Technical Research Institute. Think of these guys as Japan's absolute top guns of engineering. And their mission was crystal clear: take this plane apart and figure out what makes America tick.
Now, this was a massive headache. The B-17 was way more complex than anything the Japanese engineers had ever dealt with. They were literally piecing them together with salvage parts from different wrecks and poring over captured American manuals. But just getting them to fly was only problem number one. The next was even trickier. How in the world do you fly two enemy bombers thousands of miles back to Japan without your own forces blasting them out of the sky? The solution was this incredibly complicated flight plan, with fighter escorts and alerts sent to every single air defense unit along the way. It was this delicate, high-stakes ballet just to get their new teachers home safely. So once the bombers were safely at Tachikawa Airfield, the real work started. A team of specialists began taking them apart, piece by piece. But this wasn't just about reverse engineering a plane. It was more like an industrial autopsy. They weren't just looking at the parts. They were hunting for the philosophy, the big idea that let America build a machine like this in the first place. And this is where the light bulb really went on. You see, Japanese industry at the time was built around the skill of a master craftsman. Think of a master violin maker, where every part is hand-fitted, unique to that one instrument. So no two Japanese planes were ever exactly the same. But the B-17? Whoa, that was something totally different. It was like a factory that could churn out 1,000 perfect violins a week. It wasn't about the craftsman, it was all about the system. The clues were just everywhere. And they were mind-blowing. They'd measure the rivet holes on wings from two different captured planes, and they'd line up perfectly. They took apart the engines and found out a cylinder from one would slide right into another one. No special fitting needed. The electrical wiring didn't use hand-soldered connections. It used machine-crimped ones. Every single hydraulic fitting was standardized. But the real bombshell, the thing that probably sent a shiver down their spines, was a tiny manufacturer's stamp on an oxygen regulator. It wasn't from Boeing or any aircraft company. It was from an auto parts supplier. That one little stamp told them everything they needed to know, and it was terrifying. It meant that America's entire industrial base, car factories, you name it, could be turned into one giant arsenal. This wasn't just a different way of doing things. It was a completely different reality. And this whole idea was summed up perfectly by Shizu Kikuhara, who designed Japan's own massive flying boat. He wasn't just impressed by the parts themselves. He was looking at how it all fit together. He saw that the true genius of the B-17 was that this incredibly complicated machine was actually designed to be simple to operate, and maybe even more important, simple to build and fix at a massive scale. All the complexity was baked into the system, not left in the hands of the individual worker. So the engineers had figured out the how. They understood the physical evidence of America's production machine. But the real gut punch, the truly devastating part of the story, wasn't in the metal. It was in the math. It came from a simple calculation they made based on serial numbers and manufacturing dates they found stamped on the planes. They were about to discover the true, terrifying scale of the gap between their two countries. They crunched the numbers, and they came up with a figure that must have seemed like a typo. The reality was this. In 1 year, 1944, the United States produced 96,000 aircraft. Just let that number sink in for a second. That's more than 260 planes rolling off assembly lines every single day. This is what that number really meant. While Japan was straining to build 28,000 aircraft in its absolute best year, America was just casually churning out more than 3 times that.
They suddenly realized that it didn't matter if their fighters were better or their pilots were more skilled. For every B-17 they managed to shoot down, America could just build a dozen more to replace it. The horrible truth was they weren't fighting an army. They were fighting a factory. It was a war of attrition, and the numbers right here told them they'd already lost. And that's the whole story, right there. The B-17 wasn't even necessarily a better plane than what Japan could build. Its real weapon was the system behind it, a system that at its peak let factories roll 16 brand new flying fortresses off the line every single day. The bomber they were studying wasn't the weapon. It was just proof of the weapon. The real power was the invisible system that created it.
So the war ends and Japan's industry is in ruins. But that knowledge, those tough lessons learned inside that captured American bomber, that didn't go away. The very same engineers who had measured those rivets and studied that alien production system would now become the architects of Japan's post-war economic miracle. The bomber had shown them how to lose a war. Now it was going to show them how to win the peace.
And what happens next is honestly one of the greatest plot twists in industrial history. The students became the masters. Those engineers took that core American idea of a precision, systematic production line, and they started to perfect it. They came up with ideas like just-in-time manufacturing. And by the 1980s, can you believe this? The roles had completely flipped. American engineers were the ones flying to Japan, touring Toyota factories, trying to figure out the secrets to their amazing efficiency. You can literally trace the path they took, and it all starts with that B-17. First, they learned the big lesson. The system is everything. Then, when they rebuilt, they built their factories around precision machines, not just skilled workers. But here's the key. They didn't just copy the American way. They started to refine it, making it even better. Until finally, they became the world leaders, and the lesson had come full circle. Okay, so why are we talking about an 80-year-old bomber? Why does this story still matter so much to us today? Well, because this story was never really about an airplane. It's about the hidden architecture behind any kind of success.
It all comes down to this idea of a production system. It's that invisible framework behind any great achievement. It's not the product you hold in your hand. It's the philosophy and the process that made it. Whether you're building software, running a business, or even just trying to get more done in your day, you have a production system. It's the underlying engine that decides what you can do, how well you can do it, and how fast you can scale. The Japanese engineers learned that to compete, you have to master the system.
And that is the big takeaway. The engineers back then realized that trying to build a plane to beat the B-17 was a waste of time if they couldn't beat the factory that built the B-17. Success isn't just about a great idea. It's about having a great system for creating and delivering that idea. That was true for Boeing in 1944, and it's just as true for every tech startup today.
Which brings us to one last question to think about. That B-17 revealed a hidden system of mass production that literally changed the world. So, what are the invisible systems that are shaping our lives right now? Is it the logistics network that can get a package to your front door in just a few hours? Is it the algorithms that decide what news and videos you see? Or the financial systems that move money around the world in the blink of an eye? The lesson of that old bomber is simple. The most powerful forces are often the ones you can't see, and the people who take the time to understand them are the ones who are going to win.